Oh, yeah. My phone just told me that you're recording.
Very official. Excellent. We'll go ahead and cue us in. It's been a while since I've done this, isn't it? We've got Stalin, yes. Waiting for music to cue. I think it's coming in. Let's try that again. All right, if this does not work, I'm going to get Roger to sing it for us. What's cueing? What's going on here? Oh, it's frozen. That's what's going on. It's frozen. This is the delightful component of the episode here, where we're just going to make sure that everything is supposed to be doing it like our sound check. All right, Roger, are you ready? Josh is going to do harmony. Frank, take the bass.
I have to apologize. I'm having a bad hair day.
Are you?
Yeah, my hair and my beard's all scruffy, and I haven't shaved my neck, and it's just a disaster. So not very photogenic.
Okay, I'm going to see if I can just reset this. It is just pausing. So while you're talking about your beard, oh, there's your sound. So, hello, my dear.
We are recording currently.
With
Recording.
sound technical issues, yeah.
Do you want to use your?
I just wanted to ask if Danica, she asked if I could go to her house or her dad's house.
This is not a time to ask. You have to ask me after.
If we don't have music, then Roger has to sit.
He's like.
Let's try this again. Recording, and there it is. Good evening and welcome once again to Friendology. This is episode number 10. We've made it to the double digits. Episode 10 on August the 9th. August the 9th. Glad to have you join again once more. Tonight we have Frank, Roger, Joshua, and Binyam. Tonight's episode, we are featuring a very juicy conversation. I have the fancy title said, Creating and Implementing Boundaries in the Place of Kindness. Thanks for joining Friendology once more. Gents, it's been some time. It's been actually almost a month since we last recorded. We took a hiatus last recording session just because we didn't have as many people as we wanted to join in. So we just had more of a casual checking in. One of the things we want to facilitate as we continue our collaboration on this podcast is ongoing deepening friendships. And that is something that we hold really meaningful. And so that happens both on recording and most definitely off recording. So we're going to start off with a brief check-in session. Given that has been some time, Frank, I'm going to start off with you because you have, I think, a lot more to share with us based on what you've been doing and where you're at presently because of those shenanigans you've been up to. He's giving me this deer eyes in the light headlights.
Deer in the headlights.
There we go.
Yeah.
I'll picture that one.
Yeah. It's been wild. I've been waking up, going to work, coming home, and going to bed. It's been but no, I did a trip out to BC to visit family, and that was lovely. But then picked up a cold bug that wasn't COVID, and which is why I am now on Zoom so that I don't give my cold bug to all of you guys.
You know, I find because even as I talk to people today, when they cough, they're also having to just do that second clarification. This is not COVID.
I know.
Everybody does that now.
The weird thing, it's like unacceptable to cough in public now.
Yes.
So yeah, that's kind of my check-in. but yeah, honestly, it's kind of like we're in the dog days of summer now, right? So so yeah, it's been a crappy summer, I think, because we've been shrouded in wildfire smoke, but hopefully there's still some days to redeem us here. But I'll pass on to Roger now. Put him on the
I
spot.
love
That's
it.
That's awesome.
I mean, I'm doing great. I'm my only thing that sort of sits in the corner of my mind as I smile my way through life is that my kid starts college in a few weeks and she needs a place to live. And so the sooner she does, the better. And I'm not paying $1,000 a month for a room for rent in Orlando, Florida, because that's ridiculous what's happening. So we're trying to negotiate and find the best thing and best. I'm totally fine. She's doing fine, and that's just my little thing in my brain in the corner kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, try to get her someplace to live and a job. Oh, she just got a job today. Yeah, she's got a job today.
Incredible.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So she'll be doing her thing. So yeah, once she gets her stuff, then I'll take her out of that corner of my mind.
Yes, Roger, you precede all of us in seeing your offspring.
Yeah.
That's a new way of saying offspring. You're seeing your offspring grow into the independent zone of life.
Yeah.
Like Josh and I will be a few years before we get there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It'll be exciting. It'll be exciting.
Yeah.
It'll be exciting.
I hope we do well with that too.
Well,
Yeah.
I have no doubt. Yeah.
And I saw the pictures of your daughter. She is gorgeous too.
Yeah, she doesn't think so, but
Oh.
yeah, teen girls.
Not
Yeah.
only teen girls, but even women who are gorgeous.
Yeah.
Usually, if they don't have that kind of, it seems, input in life to affirm their self-worth, they're pretty hard on themselves. So I've seen that a lot. Yeah.
She's finding herself, so yeah.
All right, who are you gonna direct it to? Frank.
Oh,
chose you.
Friendology. I got bam right all over Joshua.
Well, things with me have been going really quite well on all domains, I would say. And just a few new things coming up, like going to visit my mother.
You're going to go.
Going to go this coming weekend, so that's going to be an interesting trip down to Regina, of all places. But it'll be good to see relatives and such. And then just a strange sort of incident happened a couple of days ago. I found out that a really good friend of mine, his wife just passed away, and he was one of my closest friends, especially during my 20s. I think about 5 to 7 years ago, moved to Ontario. So our friendship has changed just because of distance, of course. But we were quite close. He actually lived in this very house with me. He was my roommate.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah.
Way back when you first got here.
Quite a long time ago. He lived here as a roommate. What am I doing here?
That's right.
Long before I got married, etc. And yeah, so I've been talking with him. So it's interesting how, distance, you don't, often, stay connected. Like he's always been connected, but you have your life in town here. He has his life in his new city, and you do your life, right? Family gets in the way, etc. And then a death, a sudden, unexpected death. And I've been talking with him for over an hour a day now, the last couple of days. So it's actually been kind of good to reconnect with him. But of all reasons or situations, it's kind of odd. But all things considered, I've been doing personally quite good. So
I find it meaningful, Joshua, before you jump to me. How there's been a disconnect, not in the friendship, but just in circumstances in life, and yet he reached out to you at a critical moment of loss, almost as a foundation source of what he once experienced by way of foundational stability. And so maybe that's something you said there.
I think you're
about
right.
the friendship, especially too, right? I mean, in the midst of all that's happened between then and now,
we developed as early young adults, young adulthood.
Yeah.
We developed together, side by side, right?
and this is almost like consistency because I'm thinking of the other friend you shared about on a previous podcast who had cancer and passed away.
Yeah.
remember
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
Remember that now?
Yeah, I did.
And even that was a meaningful one where like you guys reached some pretty deep spots too.
We did. Yeah.
Friendship wise. So
Absolutely.
that's an interesting thing to watch as you're seeing these past remembrances coming back into the picture again in meaningful ways.
Yeah.
For
History. Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking about one of the ways I've told my followers sometimes too. One of the things I reflect on in the context of friendship is how you can assess the strength of a friendship in the way that inconvenience comes into play appropriately. There are some expressions of inconvenience, checking in the context of friendship that isn't, I think, appropriate when they're maybe codependent or they're just asking too much, or if it's one-sided, one side is giving more than the other side is receiving.
Or demanding,
Absolutely.
expecting too much. Yeah. Right.
But when it's appropriately expressed, that kind where it's a vulnerable extension of oneself to say, hey, I'm that kind of need, and I'm going to reach out to you. And I remember, like, you were in the midst of hosting a group of friends, right? And you're like, I gotta go. That was an inconvenience, and yet you're like, guys, and we all understood, of course, right?
Of course,
But
yeah.
It just was like, you were able to go and tend to him, and even then, still make time for him, right? Time that you necessarily don't have freely, but you're like, I'm gonna make this space in the context of his point of need.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's really cool.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. I was noticing that there.
Mm.
All right, so what's going on with Binion? Yes, there's some big things that have gone on. I made a big decision since we last were on the podcast, and Frank, you don't know this as well. I made the decision that I'm going to give up my place downtown, the apartment that I love so dearly. I have an apartment downtown, beautiful view of the city. It's a very modest place, and I have given that spot to my sister and her friend from high school who were spending this. She was spending the summer here, and I was very happy to see them both experience. A good time here in the context of a safe place. It's in a beautiful part of the city. But as the summer end approaches, my sister and I had talked about moving in together as roommates again. And we're thrilled about that, but one bedroom is not going to suffice because she's a woman now and she needs her space. And it's a really good dynamic between the two of us. So I made a decision to give up that spot and look for a 2-bedroom for my sister and I. And I was planning to do that for the good duration of this month here while I try to juggle work and family and my online content and business. And so that was a lot that I had going on. But unexpectedly, I found a place this past week. Unexpectedly. It was like a really good context. And so that's super exciting. It's a bigger pad and it's a fantastic location right in the Beltline. So you're on 14.
Why didn't you come live in my building?
I
Did you?
Yes, there wasn't.
There wasn't anything?
Not suitable offerings.
Oh, okay.
I'm very specific. You get to a point, Roger, when you're saying, I've had enough experiences to know exactly what my non-negotiables are in the new spot that I want.
Okay,
right?
okay.
And one of those, I don't know if you have in-suite.
We don't have in-suite. Yeah, that's
the
sucky part.
Was what I was like, I don't want to go back to paying for laundry. That was so this place has in-suite laundry, which is fantastic. It has a beautiful balcony that faces the northwest, so it faces the city, and so it's on the 6th floor out of 7 floors, but it's not high enough to see the mountains like I was hoping to, but it's sufficient for the price that we were able to negotiate.
So you're close by,
down the street around the 2nd and 15th.
Woo!
I know. So
there you go.
Yeah.
Hey.
Biniam.
I can't wait to be able to share that with you guys. Yes. So
Hey,
now it's super exciting.
Make sure you call if you need help
Thank you.
getting settled.
I will do that. I will.
Yeah.
One of the things the landlord did was he even gave us the keys early, so we can drip our stuff in. Because one of the things that the condos can do nowadays, and I didn't realize this, Roger, was they charge you to rent the elevator on moving day.
Really?
Seriously.
Oh yeah, they do. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I was like,
yeah.
So.
But usually you get your deposit back when you're done moving. It's to cover damages in case you ding the walls and stuff when you're moving your stuff in.
Well, they failed to mention that little tidbit there, Frank.
Okay. You should be getting your deposit back when you return the elevator key.
Okay. Oh, it's not even a key that we get. It's just they wouldn't even lock the elevator for us. It was just 4 hours. to like get all your stuff in and up kind of thing. So
Mhm.
get everything ready kind of
Okay.
thing. So
Wow.
so we'll just maybe drip a few boxes at a time in over
So
the
when
next
you're moving in,
few
when
weeks.
is moving in?
Maybe like the big stuff at the end of the month, but we'll just do boxes and small handheld stuff.
I'll help.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Mm.
That's we got a few of our friends moving this month too. Oh my goodness. So, yeah. We can talk more about
Yeah,
that.
I'll talk
offhand,
after.
just so we
Okay.
don't mention names. as
Yeah,
well here,
for sure.
but that's one of the big things that's off my mind now, and so I'm thankful for that. I'm so thankful that business is getting back online with the restrictions being lifted. So that's been really encouraging. I have also made a commitment of prioritizing sleep in my schedule as number one. I've had a couple of lapses. My kids over and I stayed up the whole night. Just that night I was actually doing a lot of like checking for places and so on. But other than that, like I've been pretty good at locking in the sleep portion because that's one area that I've really struggled with for decades and making sure that I'm getting enough sleep. I just kind of cut the corners on sleep. And so that's another thing to report that I'm still working on as far as personal developments and trying to say, how can I treat myself carefully, well, kindly, all those components. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's me and what's been going on. I really appreciate the check-ins too. Again, just because, I mean, it's almost like the oil in friendships, isn't it? Saying, so we asked the question, how you doing? Good. It could stop there. But I also go a little further when people ask me, how you doing? I'm like, good, but let me figure out why. Let me figure, because, it's almost like a gut reaction to responding that way, right? But when you actually give a bit more intel and saying, so here's why I'm doing well or not, it's really helpful, I think, to create that thoughtfulness. So it's not just like, I'm good, and then you move on kind of thing. So that's why I value these early components of checking in that way.
Absolutely.
Let's jump to our conversation on now. This topic we're talking about today wasn't even my brainchild. At the end of our last podcast, I think it was you, Roger, who was like, "We need to explore this." And so, Roger, can I just prime your pump in how you came to sort of see these two together? Let me repeat again my rendition of the title, but we can even simplify it further. Creating and implementing boundaries in the place of kindness. I'm just thinking about the intersection of implementing boundaries while accounting for kindness in the place that it has.
Well, for me as an individual, I think I have three vectors where that intersects, where I struggle with boundaries in the context of kindness. My daughter, my job, a person in my job, and a friend in my life, where I'm finding myself consistently in a tug of war around maintaining boundaries while being a person who is an empath and always kind to the point of being painfully neglecting self in that way. And so persons, I won't name them, have come into my life and remind me that boundaries are healthy and boundaries are important and boundaries are needed. And so I think it came up in one of our conversations that I thought, it would be nice to hear, it would be good to hear everyone's perspectives around how they handle boundaries in relationships and the kindness component of that, because when you're someone like me who gives, setting boundaries, I find I go through guilt complex when doing so. Let's start with the daughter part. My kid is in our check-in. I mentioned her having a need. Well, guess what? She's in this need because she didn't listen and she wouldn't do what she was supposed to do. And so now I'm find myself forced to set a boundary to say, well, no. By consequence of this and virtue of me communicating to you and you not adhering to it, I have to do this boundary. The boundary includes not putting money in her bank account. The boundary includes not doing certain things, but making a compromise, right? For her failures. Her failures were that she didn't do her applications and her processes when she was told to, and now her funding hasn't happened. And so I'm stuck with having to pay her rent for a year, which was not the plan, because there's another option. So my boundary I'm setting with her is, I'll do it up to this point. You got to get a job, and I'm seeing her being pinched by life, and the boundary that I'm setting, I'm struggling and feeling the kindness piece, and so I'll start with her before I mention the other two, so that hopefully that ignites something in some of you, in terms of how you regulate boundaries while being kind and thoughtful and loving at the same time, and it's I'm going to learn from all of you tonight, because it's something I find that I have to constantly work on, knowing that setting and enforcing a boundary doesn't mean I don't love and don't care deeply. It just means that I'm protecting myself or taking care of myself. It's self-care. I've just learned. Yeah, I've just learned that. I didn't know that. Yeah, so it comes in that sense. So yeah, that's one layer or vector of how that topic came.
Great introduction. So thank
Is
you.
it? Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
a
cool.
great way. And in some way, let me just clarify before I let Josh. I know you have. I'm just seeing Joshua like, oh, I
Jumping
feel
at the
that. But just to understand again, in some sense, and I appreciate you bringing this topic up, because you're saying I'm not sure how these two work well together. Is that what you're saying? At some point, you're sensing a tension that you're trying to reconcile when it comes to the implementation of boundaries, but still doing it in a kind way. Is that what you're trying to say? Yeah.
And then there's a piece about honesty that comes with that, and truth.
Yeah.
There's a piece about honesty and truth. Me being honest to the persons where this impact, me being truthful, and am I being kind enough when I deliver and bring the boundary?
Right.
Am I being perceived as being kind enough by it? And if I'm not, why?
Right.
Yeah,
that's very good.
I'm gonna weigh in on this a little bit, if that's okay. I have the exact same kind of issue that Roger has, in search specifically with people that I care very deeply about, people that are very close in my life, like my son and some very close friend. And it's a challenge, because you kind of feel, I get the same kind of sentiment, in that you feel like you want to be kind of kind without limits to these people, to the point where I feel like I'm sacrificing my needs, but I do so willingly, and I feel that leads to an unhealthy dynamic. And so even I didn't really study psychology or any of these kind of ideas for most of my life, so even the concept of boundaries is something I only learned about maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, and understanding how to implement those, I think it's been a learning curve. So I'm also curious to hear what the kind of input you guys have, and sort of, how do you implement a boundary, about, I don't know, a specific thing, like, hey, like maybe I'm not available at this moment, maybe I'm not able to help you with this, maybe I'm not able to get that ready, maybe I'm not able to be there, maybe I'm not able to give you what you want, but still, and then not kind of be overwhelmed by guilt, and still feel that I'm still a kind person, I still care about you, but it needs to happen in this context where I'm doing it in a healthy way for me. So yeah, this is sort of a struggle I have as well. And so I think that I kind of overdo the kindness thing with people I'm really close with. I don't seem to struggle with boundaries with I guess more of my I guess just regular friends and coworkers, and definitely struggle a bit with my family as well. My parents, my sister, but I think, I'm working on that kind of stuff, and trying to be like, this is what I need to communicate what I need. And then kind of still giving them what I think that is an appropriate amount of attention, but without kind of overextending. So yeah, I want to echo what Roger said. And
I want to echo back because I have an example to give, and you shared about not being able to do it with people who are so close to you. The thing for me is that once a level of caring comes in, I have a hard time setting the boundary. And then what's hard is when you do find the strength to set the boundary, and the person on the other end is not receiving then what you're communicating as the message of what that boundary is. And I'm having that with a kid, with a female coworker,
Right.
and a female friend. And it's hard. So my most recent example of this happened yesterday. I was in Chestermere for the weekend. My kid is in Orlando, as you now know. She's got a virtual graduation to do. And I've been the kind of person who's always communicated. I've got things doing. Your dad's got a life. Just give me a heads up, and I'm there. I'm in the middle of a workshop, the collaborative workshop, and I get a text from her, Dad, the graduation's happening now on Zoom. Can you come? Come on. You want to be there as a parent. You love your kid. You've told your kid many times, give me a heads up, give me a heads up.
Yeah.
And the kid is going to wait till the graduation
The
is
actual
happening.
time.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, in the older days, but before me learning how to set boundaries, I probably would have said, I've got to go. I've done this.
Yeah.
But then I was like, I'm learning to do boundaries. I was like, wonderful. Sorry, I can't be there. I'm tied up, and unfortunately, you're only telling me now, so I won't be able to make it. But even doing that created a bit of feeling for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
you echoed and I echoed back, and let me get off.
Yes.
Before Josh jumps in here, I just wanted to know one of the things I value in community is like one of those beautiful expressions. I'm like, oh, this is lovely. So I just want to take note here in this group here tonight. We've got the two doctoral individuals, the two have PhDs. And what an amazing display of humility. Saying, I'm trying to figure something out here. And so I just want to just take a moment and say kudos to you gents. You're like the academics here who are esteemed by the world, for your accomplishments that way. But you're saying we don't have everything figured out. And so thank you for displaying that really well. Humility. Joshua.
Gratefully, I have a PhD in humility, so I'll be okay. I do admit that I do have all the answers.
Let's take him out to the back and roast him.
Oh, of course I do not. That is definitely. Anyways, I love everything about what you guys are saying, and I just had a few thoughts as we were talking about the word boundaries, and I mean, obviously we want to set the stage. Like, what is a boundary? Of course, most people know. I think it's about a sort of a limitation that we set for ourselves. And this is the terminology that I use. I contrast that with telling other people what they need to do, putting rules on them. That's different than my own personal boundaries, right? So it's like, this is what I will do, and this is what I will not do. And I really echo was it you, Roger, that said it was self-care? Yeah, absolutely self-care. And another word is maybe assertiveness, right? I mean, assertiveness is the communication component of the boundaries. But really the idea with assertiveness is that you're holding on to your own needs. You're being true to the things that you care about, your self-care, right? And you also you don't want to be aggressive. You don't want to hate people, of course. You want to be kind, you want to care. And so there's this balance as you're with that story, right? It's this balance of wanting to care for yourself and wanting to care for others. I think it's so common that people feel guilt or other emotions, maybe having some thoughts of perhaps fear of loss of connection. If I say no, if I put my boundary up, will this person cut me off? Will they view me in a negative way? What will happen? And we sort of make assumptions, or we jump to conclusions about what they will do, and then we're afraid of that. And so what do? We just give in, and we don't have boundaries. And often I would say, I mean, it depends on the connection, but especially really good connections, I think that fear of loss of connection is not really a good, helpful thought or emotion. Because, for example, with Binyam, it's like, if you asked me something and I said no, and hopefully I communicated a little bit, or if not, you would ask me. But because we have a good connection, you're not going to go off and be all bitter and resentful and hate me and then cut me off because of one little no. And so for me to be afraid of saying no or setting my boundaries because of that, I think is really unfortunate, and in most cases is out of proportion to the threat of a loss of connection. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yes.
And we also or we also maybe fear that someone's gonna either cut us off or misinterpret the no as a selfish thing. You're just a selfish person. Well, are we selfish? No. Well, it depends on how firm our boundaries, I suppose, are. And I guess there's a point at which if we're like hyper boundaried in all the ways and we won't do anything, we won't bend in any way. I suppose that's an extreme, maybe not a healthy way of living, right? So we want boundaries. We want good, healthy boundaries, but don't want them so locked in. But at the same time, yeah, we don't want them so loose that we just get walked on.
It's funny, and Binion, this is going to help you to lead into something here, because in your intro check-in, you talked about being available. You always tell your friends you want to be available for them, and they say within reason, because whatever. I have a close friend who that's become a challenge, and in the friendship, and someone who purportedly understands boundaries and purportedly understands being communicated to about boundaries, who you want to be there for someone, as you described in your opening, but you said there are people who, I don't want to say like vampires, but they suck more than they're able to balance. And this particular friend is emotional and fragile, and I've identified the issue and thought I was being honest and kind by communicating. And sometimes when I realize for persons who can't see boundaries, even though they say they do, truth becomes an impediment because they're not able to receive truth. And when truth is given, even gently, there's a negative reaction that it's a criticism when it's not. It's a loving rendition of what one sees in a relationship and what one's asking by way of a boundary in terms of, I can't always be there for you when you emotionally broken and crying and bawling when you keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over. And after the fifth time, I've told you why this keeps happening. It's wearing on me. I love you. However, I now need to draw a boundary. Right? So you talked about that in your being available for friends. And I don't know how you manage to balance that. So, you say you're there for your friends and the friends are going to reach out to you at times when it's most inconvenient. Right? However, I thought of that person when you said that. So I don't know if you want to share about that, how you navigate that. Balance.
So like I see it like a balancing act here, like on a teeter totter or like on a ledger, you see both sides balancing. I like that analogy of balance. And it's not always a 50-50, sometimes it'll just be like a little bit disproportionate depending on the seasons you're in. But the way I've sort of processed, now this has been a learning process for me, Roger. The number one thing I would probably start off by saying is, in my own frame of reference, it really started off with knowing how to care for myself first. I've lived decades in a lifetime of giving with other people at the core of my concern while neglecting me. And so in this zone, I've depleted my body, but then continue even pushing further than that and continuing giving. And that brought me to places emotionally where I felt the extreme imbalance of just giving everything, but not necessarily expecting anything in return. In essence, giving the whole fort and having nothing to show for myself, how I'm going to continue looking after this vessel here. So like my beginning, entry point into this conversation of the intersection between implementation of boundaries and the expression of kindness starts off with kindness, not towards other people first, but towards myself first. How can I start off by being so self-aware of what my body is, my temperament, my personality, what my needs are along the way? Because what we're really talking about is survival. How can we survive socially in a context that also facilitates a good balance? And so for me, the first topic is, how do I look after number one here first? How do I look at myself in the mirror and say, I can legitimately say, here's what my needs are, and here's how I'm going to protect what I need, protect how I'm going to like serve here first before I start thinking of giving externally. If that's backwards, Roger, I start doing what I did before and depleting myself. But if I say, how is my gas tank in here first? Like for example, before I came here tonight, my tank was running low. I knew it was going to be just a little bit late, but I needed to get to the gas station first. I need to get to the gas station and get some gas. And I mean, I can do it after this, but I go to a specific gas station that has the cheapest gas in town. Which is
we're talking literal gas.
Oh,
here.
I wanted to gas station too.
Thank you.
You actually were talking literally.
Yes, literally. This is an analogy here.
Yeah.
So I needed to make sure I went and got gas where I usually get it, because if I didn't, then I'd be depleted if I came here first and I went there afterwards. So that's a literal analogy there. Talk more figuratively now and how I'm applying it. If we're not doing the same thing with reference to our own energy, with our own personality, our own temperament, you'll find that the world is going to take everything from you, because they love expressions of kindness and so on. But without the implementation of boundaries, they're going to suck you dry. You've got to put something in place where you're saying, I can go so far before I also need some more in my gas tank again. Does that make
Absolutely.
sense? And so that's why I say start off with here first. And now when this intersects, this combination of implementation of boundaries with kindness, I'm saying kindness not in reference to how people perceive you, but how you perceive yourself. How are you showing kindness to yourself first is a really important starting place. If you're not thinking about how to be kind to yourself first and what you need to look after for yourself, you're starting off on the wrong premise. Only when you show yourself kindness can you, I would argue, show appropriate expressions that can be generous as far as you want to externally. See, my reference point of how others perceive me by way of kindness does not even come to the frame of field until I first say, am I being true to what I need to do for myself? Am I being kind in the way I think about myself? Am I being kind in the way I'm asking for what my needs are? Am I being kind in the way I'm implementing all these things? In some areas, I'm dropping the ball of, like I was saying earlier, with sleep. I'm still working on that. But other areas, interpersonally and socially, I'm like, no, this is not my non-negotiable. How can I implement this, first of all, for my sake first? Why is that? I've experienced the frustration, Roger, the frustration, and I was talking to you in a private conversation in the past, the frustration of when you keep on giving, but no one else is catching what you're doing, and you're being depleted, and no one sees how you're being depleted. Do you know what I'm saying? So what do I need to do to first of all know myself before I think about others? Only then, Roger, Frank, do I go to the level of saying, okay, now how can I extend myself without frame of reference of banking on how I'm perceived externally. One of the big vices, I would argue, in our cultural context is we're prisoners to our perception in public, amongst our community, amongst our friends, our family. We're prisoners to saying, I wonder what they think about me, and we're dictating our decisions based on others' perceptions of us instead of our perception of ourselves first. Only when I know myself really well and I'm attending to myself can I present myself to others in a way that I choose. And then as I present myself to them, I'm okay with either response of I don't like how you're presenting yourself or what you're offering, or I love it. Either or, I'm only letting that in so far and saying, hey, as far as I know what I need here, I'm going to give what I can. I'm going to draw those boundaries, and I'm going to communicate it kindly but firmly. And here's the magic piece when it comes to external expressions of kindness while implementing boundaries, is the consistency. The consistency that comes, first of all, by having advanced conversations with those individuals that you need to have, saying, here's my MO, here's how I want to progress forward, here's why I'm placing these boundaries here. You want a phone call every single day, twice a day? No, I don't have time for that. But how about if I give you a phone call every other day? I can make an extension for that. I'm going to compromise with that. Do you know what I'm saying? And if I can compromise with them, something like that, and saying, here's what I can do, here's what I can't do, and refine what that is, and when we lock that down, I rigorously keep that commitment. I'll give more if I can, but I'm going to keep what we've committed to here. When they start taking more than what we agreed upon, I'll say, actually, no, this is not what we agreed upon here. And I want to call you to reference of how we communicated about this. And then have a few conversations about that with a frequent taking more than what we agreed upon. Then I'll have a conversation and saying, we need to renegotiate this because this is not working for me. Here's what kindness comes is with consistency and keeping what you've committed to beforehand. As a parent, for example, as I'm correcting my children when they do something wrong, it'd be wrong for me to like lose it on them if I didn't explain to them first, here's the boundaries, here's the consequences of those boundaries, here's how we're going to implement the consequences. we had those conversations at the outset. That's the kindness piece. When they walk
Clear as
into-
kind.
Clear. I
I
like
think
that.
that's a term from Brene Brown. I
I
believe.
like that.
Clear as
Clear
kind.
as kind.
Clarity is kindness.
That's
And
beautiful.
what I'm hearing
Yeah.
you saying here, Vinyan,
Mm.
is that boundaries are not like one-offs,
Mhm.
though they can be, of
Sure.
course.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is it's about engineering your social and relational
Absolutely.
context
Fluidity.
consistently over the course of, so that you essentially are kind of like training the people in your life to know how to connect with you, to know how to interact with you, and to know, and therefore there's no question marks of when you say no, there's no, I wonder if no means I hate you.
Mhm.
Well, no, that's not the case. You know, clear as
Absolutely.
kind.
And you're not even good motivated by that, because people's perceptions, they can have it like way off on left field here, and you're like, that's not what I meant here. Here's what I want to communicate again. That communication piece is really important. The communication piece in advance with consistency in the implementation of it, I find that really helpful. But don't forget this sequence again that I found really helpful is starting off with square one, or home base, or this is the starting place here. How you're saying, I value myself as number one before I tend to others. It's kind of like that airplane, when they tell you, put your mask on before you put someone else's mask on. Same thing. If you're not putting your mask on by way of kindness to what you need first, and saying, here's what I need, and then communicating that to those that you want in your life, and teaching them, like Joshua was saying, how to treat you, then
So then you're also going to be in the best state in terms of self-care and all of what you're talking about. You're going to be a better emotional state, so that you're going to actually be likely a better friend. You're going to be less irritable, less annoyed, less all of those things.
Blowing for me, the happiness that I experience now. Here's the thing, I'm happy because I feel like I'm being fair with those, like the decision you made in the midst of an elaborators meeting, and you're like, your old self would have wanted to yield, right? And give up the boundary there. But you're saying, I'm teaching someone else who's very close to me how to interact with me. It may take some time, and it's on their end. You've got to let them figure out their own stuff. But as long as you're being consistent and fair and communicating, saying, hey, just like I said before, I need advance notice, I need this, these are boundaries that you're implementing. And it kind of comes by way of saying, hey, I wish I could be there, but it just falls outside of what we agreed upon here. So I hope I can be there next time. I hope you'll reach out, sooner, or something along the line. There's a kindness piece that doesn't have to lose and saying, oh, how can you calm me when I'm, no, it's more like, hey, you're probably working through this, but I can't join you in that walk. You got to figure some stuff out on your own. But for my part, I got to keep my home base here in good order, so that I preserve my happiness. So I preserve my sanity. So I preserve my purpose for why I'm going through life. You don't want to be robbed that way.
I want Frank to jump in right after I say this next thing.
Yeah.
I don't know why. My spirit says I want
I want to go ahead. Sorry.
Well, you go. You had a thought. You want
No,
to say?
I want to take a swing at this,
Okay.
if I may.
You know what's becoming apparent to me, Frank, is that boundaries can't exist without authenticity.
Okay.
It just came to me from listening to you. Boundaries cannot exist without authenticity.
Yeah.
Right.
Because that was a beautiful thought. Why did you say that?
Because I'm listening to you share and communicate and talk about how the ebb and flow of communicating and consistency, repetition.
Sure.
You have to actually make yourself vulnerable and truthful,
Right. Yes.
in order for that message to be disseminated. And so that became evident as he said what he said to me. And
Right.
so what I want to bat the ball to you with, Frank, is with him saying that, what happens when you're being consistent and the message is just not being received, and you're being authentic within the context of it, talking about what do you do?
I guess this is my thoughts on this that's been percolating a little bit, is just sort of like taking a step back, and you basically have someone that you're really close with that's upset. And this is this is the situation that we're sitting in. Now I know personally that when I'm upset, for me personally, I don't want that person to tell me the truth. I don't want that person to fix it for me. I want that person to be a sympathetic ear. That said, I have a tendency when I have an upset person in front of me to be like, I'm going to take it upon myself to fix this somehow. And that might be speaking these kind of, truths, as you say, in as tactful a way as possible. But sometimes that's not helpful. And sometimes it's, I find that what that person really needs is really just a sympathetic ear, and they don't need me to solve it for them. They don't need me to come up with, here's the truth and here's the answer. And so sometimes having that dialogue or having that understanding, that emotional check-in, which is something I've actually done with a close friend of mine, as we've kind of worked through our issues, is that, I get communicated to me, like, what do you need right now? Do you need just a support, someone to talk to, someone to bounce your emotion off of, but you don't need me to figure out how to make it better or tell you that if you did this differently, then you wouldn't feel this way. So that's kind of like, and honestly, if it was me in that situation that was upset, honestly, I don't want people to tell me how to fix it. It actually stresses me out more. I would rather just have someone that's kind of going to be my sounding board and just kind of let me have, express myself, and express my frustration. But, I'm going to wake up the next morning and I'm going to soldier on, and I will try to figure it out. And I understand that, if it can be frustrating from, the supportive person to kind of see a repeating pattern and kind of want to indicate, well, maybe this could be avoided if you did this differently. But at the end of the day, people need to take responsibility for themselves. So for me, I think it's getting a better understanding of what it is that person needs from you in that moment. Do they need that truth, or do they need just someone to vent to or cry with? That's kind of my thoughts on that topic. But I did have, not to derail this discussion, but I did have another topic around boundaries, which was really what I found is as much as there's like a guilt around setting a boundary around a certain kind of about saying no or pulling back. What I've found has been a kind of a rewarding situation is that if I don't set boundaries, I build a lot of resentment, and that comes out in the most unhealthy ways. It brings me to a boiling point. So the reward for me is, and maybe just comes full circle to the stuff that Binyam was talking about, is that gives me space to then recharge and go to the gas station, and that, when I've put these tools in place, then I feel so much better. I don't have that resentful feeling because I didn't feel like I was overextending and giving too much. And then I don't have those negative feelings creeping up, and I can recharge myself, and I can be there for those, some of those more, those needier moments. Those are kind of the two different thoughts that were percolating in my head while you guys were talking about, all these different things. That's
I want to chime in about what you're saying about bitterness. I think and resentment can come from the other side. This is kind of connected to what Binion was saying about consistency and engineering, our connections.
Right.
How we are going to connect. This is how we can connect. Is what I've seen happen, is, maybe you've alluded to this, Roger, a bit, is, when we have like more poor boundaries over time, we're kind of teaching that person that's it. That's how to deal with me, right? And then later on, if we want to raise the bar to appropriate boundaries, that person can start to become bitter and resentful.
Right.
And that's really, really difficult. Here's an easy solution to navigate. It's just tough.
Yeah.
It's really tough. And so, I mean, it's easier for me to say, perfect solution is just to have the good boundaries right off the bat. But hindsight's
But
always
to reel it
2020.
back from a bad spot to something that's more appropriate.
It's really tough.
It's a huge investment that you're probably struggling.
Oh, for sure.
Can I bring this home to you
Sure.
in an echo chamber way? You know that post you made on Facebook about new relationship energy?
Yeah.
It freaking intersects completely with all of this. Did you see that discussion, Frank?
Yes, I saw it.
Yeah, isn't
Okay.
everything that was said, you raised the topic.
So just for our listeners,
Yeah.
break down the conversation.
I'll let
Well, I don't
Joshua.
remember the quote. You probably remember it better than I do.
You made a post
The quote is like,
that
your
talked.
relationship energy
Yeah.
may not be so helpful or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't say that. I just
No,
said
you-
it wasn't a judgment. It was new relationship energy is a metaphorical way of airbrushing a new partner's blemishes,
Yeah.
really personality blemishes
Yeah.
or something
And-
like that.
And what was fascinating is the discussion thread
Yeah.
underneath
I
that
saw that too.
talks about hits on everything that we're talking about. One person responded and said they avoid NRE, new relationship energy, because then it creates these expectations, and then what they try to do is set these boundaries early and
Take it slow.
so they could say, remember that person
Yeah,
said
yeah,
that? Yeah. So I'll let you run with it. I thought maybe you run with it because you read the post.
Yeah, I
Well,
saw it.
You saw it, right? Yeah.
I saw it. I mean, yeah, my only thought when I saw that was, well, it's true, but without new relationship energy, then how would we have our cliche rom-com moments where we, show up unannounced and serenade your lover, and, and like have snowball fights and I don't know, like share each other's food and all the stuff that you crazy stuff you do when you're in a new relationship.
Right. A whole industry of movies and cheesy
Yes.
novels would
Yes.
I think if anything, what you're hoping, like if I'm hearing you, Roger, that's caution that was expressed by those individuals saying new relationship energy. And for those listeners who are wondering what a new relationship energy is, it's that excitement in the early stages of a relationship where you're connecting with someone, super excited. It can go from a few months, maybe weeks to like a couple of years time, when you're just seeing with rose-colored glasses this person, everything they do is like beautiful, they can do no wrong, that kind of element, before you start seeing some of the cracks. And so that's the new relationship and energy that we're referring to. But I wonder if at some point the expression of caution these individuals are expressing is their way of implementing boundaries and saying, how can I still keep control of this zone that can be so subjective that I may not see what is necessary to see, by implementing and going slowly and saying, how can I remain in control here so I don't lose control?
How can I control my own emotions? Emotions are not bad. I mean, new relationship energy is this, happiness, joy of what might become and what, all of that. These are fine. These are good emotions. It's, do we allow those emotions to control us? Or do we take control of those and use those emotions?
Because there are those individuals who could just get swept away. And
exactly.
so when those in their lives that may see some significant red flags speak up, they're oblivious to them because they can see nothing of those reference points. They've been swept away by this raging torrent, if you will. And so now they're at the mercy of it, but they don't see their own danger.
Yeah, and it's all the boundary piece. And it ties into sex too, because I don't know about you. I've had experiences where I've thrown all that energy into a hot, new, fascinating experience, but then I pumped all the energy in on the forefront, and then it wanes away, and then the whole thing becomes, and then you can't even be friends because you push so much energy. In this sense, I'm speaking about sexual energy versus emotional energy.
But again, that there was no reference of knowing yourself well enough to say what's a really good thing, right? We don't let children just go behind the wheel of a car as much as they'd love to. Why? Because there could be some devastating consequences. In the same way, we don't know ourselves well enough, I would argue, mostly in society. Emotionally, and how we progress. What are our weak points? What are the areas that we need some buffering on? So in the absence of that, we're like that kid behind the wheel of a car, kind of thing, and crash bang. And so there's that. I want to circle back again to what you were saying before too, Roger, because I think it's a really important point that I want to sort of hammer. from my convictional standpoint, and I'd love to push back, and that is what happens when you communicate consistently and repeatedly
God.
over time, but it
Yes.
isn't acknowledged.
Yes.
Where do you go from there was your question, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And for me, I know personally how much patience I have to extend.
Oh my God.
And so this is again that piece, brother, I would say, of knowing oneself well enough to know how much can I give by way of patiently communicating what these
Mhm.
boundaries are before the precipice where I lose it.
Oh,
Now, see
my
this
God.
precipice over here?
Yeah.
If this is a precipice over here, how can I scale it back to a safe distance over here from this precipice? Because I don't want to get to the precipice. How can I scale it back to this point over here? That's where I'm going to implement my boundaries there. And then I'm going to communicate saying, hey, I may have about 5 chances in line here before I'm at the precipice. So I'm going to scale it back to a safe amount. I'll only let this person know I have only 2 strikes or 3 strikes, and then I'm going to go through to implementation of this boundary. What that does, it keeps me from that precipice of blowing up because your boundaries weren't respected. It gives you that space to still be able to communicate it kindly. And there's that piece again. So you're saying at the outset, here's how I want to proceed. Here's the boundaries I'm implementing. We'll have this conversation 2 or 3 more times. If you're not quite getting it, I'm going to move to the implementation, whatever that looks like. And the hard part about the implementation is it always seems mean on the receiving end. And that's how we appropriate it to ourselves, saying, we're so mean. I can do this. Instead of saying, no, I've given this person everything that they need to know in advance. I've communicated in advance as kindly as I can. And now moving to the implementation piece, I'm still going to do kind of the same. Listen, we have tried this a few times. I've given you the amount of times I said I can hang on for, and you've known this. Now it comes to the point where I must implement this, and this is where it's going to shift to, whether it's cessation of connection or whether it's something more diminished in your connection, whatever that looks like. But if failure to implement means you are teaching them how to screw you over and over again.
Mhm.
You're bringing down your value instead of raising your value. The implementation of boundaries communicates very clearly to someone your worth, and that's how you show yourself love and kindness. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's a meme I saw that's
And
recently
you
on
model to
Instagram.
others too. Sorry.
Yeah,
just
that's
wanna
exactly
chime
what I'm gonna say.
in. Okay.
Yeah, that the meme I saw said that if you don't model to people how you want to be treated, quite
Yes.
often you're not going to be treated that way, and that's
Yes,
going to
yes.
create resentment and da 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 da.
Yeah.
And you think about the patience point. I think as individuals,
Mhm.
we have to recognize in these relationships, whether it's romantic, sexual, parental, professional, where our thresholds are, and really put the boundary in place in a multiple different ways, because you can be communicating this
Yeah.
and it's not being heard.
Yeah.
And then if you don't enforce, then there's going to be an explosion that's going to be so strong,
Yeah.
that there'll be no turning back from there.
And then you feel more depleted because
Yeah.
you lost control.
Yeah.
You start off on such a good point in trying to have boundaries in the first place, but
Yeah.
the failure to implement those boundaries, now you're feeling even less in your worth because you went to a trajectory that didn't represent your values of how you want to proceed and show yourself kindness and love, right?
Oh, so
Yeah.
much, yes.
And it can be I call this, and I've been, and I'm thinking about my personal situation. I call it a buzz skill. It's a buzz skill when you can't navigate through that. It's
Sure.
a buzz skill in the sense of love feelings. It's a buzz skill in terms of loyalty. Buzz skill in terms of if there's sex involved, it's a buzz skill as well.
It saps the energy
Yeah.
from where you want it to be. And I like to be a hell yes when I'm with someone.
Yeah.
So I know this conversation needs to happen when something's out of sync. But I need to first of all figure out, instead of like lashing out and saying, you're frustrating, I need to scale it back, process on my own and say, what am I really needing? How do I now implement what I need by way of boundaries? It's like almost saying, what are the policies for rules of engagement with me? And how am I going to present this? And what am I going to communicate? Because you want to make this work too. You don't want to spring something on someone and say, don't you ever say this to me again. Next time, you don't want to do that, right? You're saying, we're going to work at this, but here's how much I can handle here so far in my progression forward. And you're doing this, like you were saying earlier, Roger, because you value communicating authentically with this individual, and you want them to know the real you, especially how you guys can work really well together. You're really driven by that desire to say, I want this connection to work. And for this connection to work, we need to do some housekeeping. And it's just acknowledge that there's different perspectives. It's not saying you're wrong or right, but you're starting to compromise and say, how can we collaborate to make this a really happy connection in a way that we're agreeing to engage?
Yeah, I would say I would follow on that, Biniam, and sort of say like, this is how implementing this boundary helps me so that I can be a better friend.
I love that.
Right?
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
That's kind of like, I think the healthiest way to bring it across, and you know, and just just kind of be clear about why this is helpful for me, how this
high level stuff.
I think.
Really good.
So,
That's amazing. Yeah.
Because that's high level stuff, then Frank, what do you do if you receive a river or flood of tears, and when you're exercising that or giving that, and the river flood of tears is being said with, well, you know, you need that, but what about my feelings or my emotions? You know, what do you know, how do you prevent yourself from crumbling?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the psychologist here, but I honestly, like, I think there's a time and a place that you can have these kind of conversations, right? And usually an emotionally charged one is not the time where you talk about like how this is now I'm going to, you know, how I'm going to implement my new boundary.
Okay.
If there's a safer situation for that, you know, that's at least my like kind of, you know, uneducated kind of understanding of it.
Great point though, Frank. Great point, because that's the wrong time to have it, because you like, it's almost like it may come up actually it rarely comes unannounced. It usually comes up because of repetition, I would suggest, right? Saying, they do this again. They are going,
or perhaps you've triggered some kind of abandonment.
Yeah.
You know, and
Right.
yeah. But I mean, I don't know if there's a way to implement a boundary while at the same time reassuring that you're not abandoning this person.
I would say like one of the examples I'm thinking of is watching in the supermarket or in some public context, a parent chastising their kid publicly. And there's embarrassment on the parent's side. And so as I watch that scene, what I'm observing, especially if I know them really well, to know that at home they don't implement boundaries, but outside they do, because their kids are outside the social media. You see what I'm saying?
Interesting.
And so what I'm observing there is that there is a failure to do so in the appropriate times, when it's not when it's not energy invested, right? When you're in a good zone, saying, let's have a conversation about some stuff. That's the ideal time. So for parents, the ideal time, I would suggest, to have those conversations with your kid of expectations, behavior wise, is not in public, but at home. But at home is where we're most lazy, and we kind of let things go until we're in public and we're like, oh crap, I got to attend to this. And then they sort of lash out. That's the wrong time. That analogy I'm applying to this one here, in the sense of saying the wrong time is in those kind of thing. You don't want to have that conversation then. When you're like, because you're not in that objective mode. You're in a subjective, you're taken by the passion of your emotions. Take time aside, process with some safe friends, I would suggest for our listeners, about what your steps forward should be, helping you process and get all that emotion out there. Because when you sit down with that individual, you want to be in your Zen state. You want to have an awareness of what you're asking for in a really in a neutral zone. You know, saying, hey, I care about you. I want to communicate some hard stuff, however, and it's going to get emotional. They may get emotional. And hell, yes, Frank, and Roger and Frank, for most guys, do you know when they throw the towel in, when they try to do this? When a woman cries.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? Because they're like, I don't have anything to, like, I don't know how to respond to this. This is like beyond my sphere of comfort. When emotions come up like that, they're like, I don't know what to do, and they yield. What I would do in my, like what I've done in my context, because I've seen this in the professional context and also in the personal context, in some very high tense situations, group-wise, especially when competing motivations are coming up and they get emotional and they use that manipulatively or not. But I want to keep very clear, what is the goal that I'm aiming for? What is the point that I'm trying to make here? So I'll acknowledge their emotions. I'll say, I can see this is really impacting for you. I want to acknowledge that this is really difficult for you. as you process those emotions, I want to bring you again to attention to what we're talking about. This is the point here I'm trying to address here. When they're saying, what about my needs as well? I say, a good response on my part would be, I'd love to consider them. Let's compare what you're asking and what you need and what I can give, and help me collaborate to give something that I can be a hell yes to. You don't want me in this relationship to be giving out of obligation. You want me to be giving out of a hell yes, I want to do this for you because I can do it for you. But if I can't afford what you're asking of me and I'm depleting myself, I'm not going to be the good friend that you need. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
So that's really important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, I love the piece you were saying there, the Frank, about that. What state are you in as you're going in emotionally?
Mhm.
Where's the energy at? That's a really critical one as well.
Good stuff.
Gents, we are over an hour here. It's been a really rich conversation. I think our
Oh my
listeners
God!
are
And I
gonna-
never ever mentioned the coworker example.
I
But maybe that's
know.
another.
I'm happy to send this because I mean we don't have to like cut it.
Yeah.
Do you want to explore that? Just
No, real quickly, it's
Yeah.
just to give a highlight on the fact that it'll happen in any kind of relationship.
yeah.
The problem that I had with the coworker was the anticipation and expectation that I always gave by not setting boundaries and being available. Every time she called, I would pick up. Every time she inquired, I'd do. And then I realized that my mental health was being impacted by this person's dependence on me and insistence on me and expectation of me without
Sure.
boundaries. And then when I said, I wrote, I fortunately in this instance, I did the pull back the emotion part, right? And I sat and I wrote an email. And I said, this thing that you did today at this time is an example of this, and I'd rather, and you know what I got was something challenging. Was, oh well, I didn't know I was doing that. I didn't realize I was doing that, and an attempt at change. But what we talked about earlier was something that I've had to keep doing, was the consistency of reinforcement, because the person kept going back into a pattern of doing the same thing, and I had to keep reinforcing and say, no, I'm not answering the phone. I saw you calling. Let's schedule a time to talk. You know what I mean? And so I
Yeah.
have to do the work too.
Sure.
You know, and it's the same thing in
Good for
loving
you.
relationships and parental relationships. Yeah. But that's a highlight of the employee, coworker context.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
There's tremendous freedom when we do the hard work of implementing boundaries. This is gutsy work. It takes a lot of courage to be able to do so, because on the one hand, you're fighting against perceptions of others' views of you as you go into this process. And then at the same time, you're also saying, I'm learning how to put myself at the heart of where I need to be. But it's a freeing experience, because now as you're engaging, here's the thing, I feel totally in control as I engage the world with my content online, to be able to, like, a question that was challenged with recently was, how can, and this is in our gathering on Saturday, the challenge was, how are you able to, being so well known and everyone recognize you, there's going to come a point in which you can't continue to give because there's just too many. And I said, for me, that's not a concern, because I've had some practice along the way in being able to implement boundaries of how much I can offer and where that line stops, where I'm going to go, where I'm not going to go. And I have no reservations about communicating those. I'm unapologetic as I implement and extend where my boundaries lie, so that others know and can honor and respect it. The confidence with which I come to the table with where I am saying, here's how available I am, and here's where I'm not available, that confidence enables me to be able to challenge others to step up and say, play in my field on my terms. Does that make sense? And so there's something that is really freeing about that when you're able to engage the world that way, your world, whatever that looks like.
I think we should, to kind of maybe summarize and wrap this up,
Sure.
create another word, because there's, like, you know, poor boundary settings, there's boundary settings, and there's bindery settings. Opinion level boundary
Gentlemen, I'm just saying this on our recording here. Maybe afterwards, let's do a quick TikTok. I'd like to feature structure, like just an introduction of all you guys. Frank, I'll just do a TikTok after this recording finishes, just again to encourage more of my followers to this conversation. This is a really, really important one, I think. A really necessary one that I think it's there. But before I move to the closing here, Roger, let me start off with you. You're the catalyst for this conversation. You had some questions, you had some cobwebs in your mind. You're saying, help me process. Is this kind of crystallizing in some helpful way?
It is. It is. It is. It is. I mean, I'm walking away with knowing that there's work involved, there's boundaries, and there's internal work, and there's work outside, and that I am. It's okay not to feel guilty, because to hear Frank admit that he have had. That's validating, because how often do I hear someone say that as well, that they've had that? So I'm walking away feeling more empowered, not just with my daughter relationship or my love relationship or my coworker, because at the end of the day, what you've always told me are the ingredients towards mental health balance. You know, yeah, mental health balance. Which is important.
Good. Frank, how have we served you in this conversation? You're also saying
It's this conversation is close to home for me. It's something I've been working on for a number of years and getting a better understanding of. I liked this concept of the whole like social engineering idea. Hadn't really thought of it in that way, but yeah, it's a work in progress for me, an area I struggle with. And yeah, it's always a useful conversation to hear everybody's perspectives and continue to learn more every day.
Awesome. Josh, I want you to chime just before I close here as well.
Yeah, no, I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I started off being a little bit fatigued, but then we started going, and here I've woken up. I love how we talk about all of these ideas that, I mean, I don't think that there are a lot of brand new ideas, but we're stitching them together into a nice Afghan that is going to be functional and usable. So that's kind of the way I see it. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And my closing thoughts would be like, as much insight I have, or the things that I'm working from, mine have been costly lessons learned through many mistakes I've made along the way. Like I'm saying, I've had decades of being in that zone of where I ought not to have been. You know what I'm saying? And so the reason I'm just so vocal and so decisive in how I see and I'm learning my way through this is because I have been on the other side in a way that I still remember what that was like. And so that's why I have a heart for it. That's why I'm like investing, saying, I love to be able to see people's freedom in this area. And for me, that is one of the biggest reasons why I love doing what I do, is to set people free by our stories. Because as you were saying to Frank, I'm so glad you resonate with me. Someone understood you. Someone could relate with your experience, right? People really find that magical when they're able to say, someone is able to tell my story through their story. But they're also able to share a bit more insight from the other side, saying there's hope. You can actually walk through this stuff here, and on the other side is something liberating, and it's just like, it's a beautiful gift to give. And that's why I'm so thankful for all you guys in our collaboration. Well, it is well over an hour. This has been a really juicy conversation, and thank you for sticking with us through this. It's been a really heavy thing today, I think, but one this is like the stuff of life, but it's fantastic when you have friends that can come alongside to help you process and to encourage you and to challenge you when you do so. That's why we exist here on the Friendology podcast. I encourage you to give us some feedback as well through comments, questions, ideas for future episodes, but we want to model for you what's this tangible expression of friendship like. We'll see you on the next episode of Friendology.
All right, I'm gonna check out, guys. Have a good night.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Feel better. Feel better.
Cheers. Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Good night.
Okay.
That was so much fun. Let me just stop
Yeah,
the
that didn't
recording.
feel like an hour.